Moving to thing number 5, we talked a little earlier, CPI Arthur Burns. Actually has to do with used vehicle prices ticking back up. Gary, if we get an increase in goods inflation, Fed will be easing into higher CPI. And that's what you're saying is the Arthur Burns mistake, which you've talked about quite a bit on this show. Thing number 5, Gary, is inflation creeping back?
Right. So a little economic history. It's something we've discussed before. But if we go back to the 1960s and early, 1970s, the chairman of the Federal Reserve was a man named Arthur Burns. And the US started to have an inflation problem in the 1960s. And then President Lyndon Johnson summoned Burns to meet him at his ranch in Texas. And Johnson was he was a big guy with a bad temper and a bit of a bully. And as the story goes, he picked Burns up, slammed him against a wall, and told him he wanted lower rates. He wanted a hotter economy. Burns caved, lowered rates, and shortly later, we had a resurgence of inflation. And for those of us who are old enough to remember, there was horrible, horrible inflation back in the late 1970s. And the only thing that cured it was Burns was replaced by next Fed chairman Paul Volcker, who raised the Fed funds rate to right around 20%. So all the people right now who don't like our Fed funds rate a little over 5%, try to imagine at 4 times that rate. It crushed the economy, but got inflation under control. And so the Arthur Burns warning is basically economic history saying you have to be very careful when you're trying to get inflation under control about lowering rates too soon. And so, we were talking about this. And, the Manheim Used Car Index, which records used car prices, actually ticked up last month. And it was up 2.8% versus the prior month. Now, is 2.8% a big deal? No, but in a month, it's kind of significant. And one of the things we've talked about a lot here is we've had weak pricing on goods, particularly durable goods, and very high sticky prices and high sticky inflation on services. And so with continued services inflation, if that were to be joined by higher goods inflation, we've got a situation where everybody's convinced the Federal Reserve is going to cut rates in September. At this point, I think it's likely that they do. We've talked about that last week. We said our stance was moving from higher for longer to sooner rather than later on rate cuts. But this is a warning that they potentially could be making the Arthur Burns mistake and hiking into higher inflation. We're going to get a CPI report later this week. We'll see what it says. People are looking for 3%. Obviously, energy pricing is going to be a big part of it, but higher goods pricing could be a challenge for the Federal Reserve going forward.
So we're obviously expecting now, Gary, to the point we've shifted from higher for longer to sooner rather than later on those rate cuts expected to be in September. What does that number have to be, or what does that CPI increase have to look like for us to potentially bring back our favorite phrase of all? Well, I don't know about favorite, but higher
Yeah,
for longer.
right. Rob, it's a great question. And I think so what people are looking for on this week's report is a CPI of around 3%. And I think if they're around 2.9, 3.1%, anything in that range, I think people will continue to expect a Fed rate cut in September. If you start to get like a monthly increase in like 0.3, 0.4, and you start to look at a CPI like in the 3.3, 3.4% range, like something a couple of tenths of a percent above expectations, I think in that situation, the market's going to get really nervous and take down the probability of a September rate cut. I still, right now I'm sticking with where we were last week, which is the Fed is more likely than not to cut in September. I think the market thinks that for a reason at this point, but a hot CPI print and those expectations will change really quickly.
We'll keep you in tune. I'm sure we'll have updates on next week's 5 things. Gary, that CPI is this Thursday, I believe.
It's Wednesday or Thursday.
Wednesday.
I've got it in my calendar. I'll be up either way. I'm up
Gary,
by the time it comes out.
yeah, Gary will be reading the reports and listening to all the stuff so you don't have to, right?
Yeah, it's
That's
one of my favorite lines. They've put out like these 30-page press releases, and I always put in there like, for those of you who don't want to read 30-page economic reports, don't worry, we'll do it for you.
We got you covered.
Yeah.
Thanks, Gary. That's a wrap on this week's 5 things. As we mentioned at the top of the hour, be sure to consider a premium subscription as we have a new DKI position that we're teasing, going to be rolling out here in the next week or so, that we're really excited about and has a lot of tracking parallel to what we saw with Shockwave Medical, as I'm sure a lot of you are privy to back in December. As always, thank you for tuning in. Be sure to at least consider a free subscription or subscribe to us on our YouTube channel or any other social media. Gary's very active on X, Instagram as well. Variety of different mediums to get you the content and information that you want to keep you in tune with the market and what's happening. Gary, final thoughts for this week's version of the 5 things.
Yeah, a couple of them, Rob. One is on this show, we talk a lot about macroeconomics and the economy, and that stuff's interesting, and there's new news every week. But the core of what we do at Deep Knowledge Investing is we help people invest, and it's finding new ideas where we could make a multiple of our original investment in a multi-year period. That's really the thing that we get excited about. Talking about this stuff is fun, but what really energizes me is finding that next investment idea and the next opportunity to make great returns in a stock. And that's really what people come to Deep Knowledge Investing for. So if that's interesting to you, we'd love to have you. For everyone watching this, thank you so much. We've had some great subscriber growth recently. We've had a number of videos that got an increased number of views. We've had some where we've gotten a lot of comments. For everyone who's commented, whether you think I'm right or wrong or have your point of view, we love hearing from you. Thanks for engaging. Even if you disagree, just tell me why. Like, I love hearing from those guys or those people. But we really appreciate it. Your time is valuable, and the fact that more of you are spending it with us means a lot to me, and thank you. Rob, always love doing this with you. Thank you. For everyone, Rob and I, we were on the phone for, Saturday afternoon. We're both working over the weekends, trying to plan and prepare for this. And I know I said it before, but another round of applause for Alex and Andrew. A lot of times junior guys and interns don't get the credit they deserve. I just want everyone to know these guys are doing a fantastic job. The quality of their analysis and work is first rate. And we're excited to have them join us on camera every now and then. So, that's a long wrap up, Rob, but there's a lot to be grateful for this week.
No doubt about it. And Gary, likewise, I really enjoy and appreciate being a part of this and looking forward to many more 5 things shows here in the future. Gary,
All
thanks
right.
so much for your time and looking forward to chatting with you next week.
All right. Sounds good, everyone. We'll see you next week. Thanks.